A disastrous press conference just unfolded in the White House. Donald Trump's chief propagandist, Karoline Leavitt, seemed out of breath. She seemed fatigued, and she was really struggling to answer these questions. Here, she laughs at the concept. Watch this.
So the courts are basically telling you guys they think that the White House's policies, the president's policies, are in some way against the law.
Well, these laws have already been granted to the president by the Constitution and by laws that have been previously passed. I'll give you another example. For instance, we've been blocked in court for the revocation of visas.
Karoline Leavitt tried to defend the indefensible at a White House press conference, but it all fell apart. From fabricated studies in the Maha report to claims that $4 trillion wouldn't increase the deficit. This isn't just a disaster, it's a masterclass in dodging accountability. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. Karoline Leavitt stepped up to the podium, and it was clear from the start that this wasn't going to be a smooth ride. She seemed tired, struggling to keep up with the whirlwind of questions that flew at her from every direction. For someone whose main job is to appear composed and prepared, this was not her day. The reporters weren't just asking tough questions, they smelled blood in the water, and in her fumbling attempts to respond, Leavitt gave them plenty of reasons to keep circling.
Karoline Leavitt is asked by a reporter about some of the breaking news first reported by a news organization called Notice, that the Trump regime's Maha report, Make America Healthy Again report.
A Notice investigation found that the Hallmark Maha Commission report that was released last week cites studies that appear to not exist. We know that because in part we reached out to some of the listed authors who said that they didn't write the studies.
We have complete confidence in Secretary Kennedy and his team at HHS. I understand there were some formatting issues with the Maha report that are being addressed, and the report will be updated, but it does not negate the substance of the report.
The chaos started when reporters brought up the court rulings against two of Trump's cornerstone policies: tariffs on certain imports and visa revocations. These weren't minor procedural issues either. The courts had essentially smacked the administration for overstretching its authority, but instead of addressing the ruling seriously, Leavitt laughed. Yes, really. She laughed, shrugged, and brushed the concerns aside like they were nothing more than a joke. If that was meant to ease the tension, it backfired spectacularly. All it did was shine a big spotlight on the administration's lack of any concrete plan to deal with the fallout. And the reporters, they weren't letting her off the hook.
This is the most incompetent and corrupt regime imaginable. I guess fortunately their incompetence exceeds the corruption, but they're basically both very, very bad.
The president says he's not happy with all aspects of it. What changes would he like to see be made? And can this bill be both big and beautiful?
It is a one big beautiful bill, as the name rings true. The president's ultimate priority is to get this bill back to his desk for signature. And the president's priorities in this bill are non-negotiable in terms of the tax priorities he wants to see and the large tax cuts in the border investments that are currently in this bill.
Does the administration not have any plan to address these rulings? One of them asked, to which Leavitt responded with the equivalent of verbal spaghetti. She mumbled something about awaiting further clarification and moved on, but the damage was done. By the time Congress's role in the controversy came up, she was visibly rattled. One reporter pointedly asked why Congress hadn't stepped in to protect the administration's policies. Instead of giving a real answer, Leavitt waved off the question with a vague dismissal about ongoing discussions. It wasn't just that she didn't have answers. It was that she didn't seem terribly interested in finding any.
I wanted to just clarify once and for all the Qatari jet, the sale, or the gift, because the Qatari government is asking the U.S. to clarify that the jet's pending transfer was initiated by the Trump administration. So is this something that the White House is going to do?
Karoline Leavitt to clarify. So what's up with this Qatari jet? Is it a gift? Is it a purchase? How do you describe it?
The amount of of questions we've received, and we've been incredibly clear. And I have answered this, the president has answered this, the Department of Defense has answered this. This is a government-to-government gift transfer from the Qataris.
This was when the cracks in the administration's handling of the situation became glaringly obvious. The courts didn't rule against these policies on a whim. Their concerns were grounded in clear legal principles. The visa revocations, for example, were deemed a violation of procedural due process, something most middle school civics students could explain. The tariffs issue? An overreach of executive authority, plain and simple. Yet the administration had apparently decided the best way to respond to these valid critiques was to double down on arrogance and hope the storm would blow over. Spoiler alert, it didn't. What made it even more damning was how this press conference highlighted the administration's broader issues. It wasn't just about one bad day at the podium, it was about a White House that didn't appear to have a coherent strategy for dealing with major setbacks. Dismissing the courts and Congress like inconvenient speed bumps might play well to a certain segment of their base, but it's not exactly a sustainable approach to governance. For an administration already facing mounting legal and political challenges, this level of disorganization was like tossing gasoline on a dumpster fire.
Here she then lies and claims that the budget bill will not increase the deficit when by its very terms it adds $4 trillion to the debt ceiling. And even if you listen to what the MAGA Republican senators are saying, it will increase the deficit.
The blatantly wrong claim that the One Big Beautiful Bill increases the deficit is based on the Congressional Budget Office and other scorekeepers who use shoddy assumptions and have historically been terrible at forecasting across Democrat and Republican administrations alike. The CBO's latest forecast makes the same anemic growth assumptions as they did in 2017, missing the impact of the One Big Beautiful Bill.
And then there was that laugh. Let's talk about the laugh for a second, because it wasn't just a throwaway moment, it set the tone for everything that followed. Imagine you're watching someone try to explain why their house is on fire, and instead of grabbing a hose, they just chuckle nervously and shrug. That's basically what Leavitt looked like in that moment. It wasn't reassuring, and it definitely wasn't professional. If anything, it served to underline just how out of their depth the administration was on these issues. The press conference was already on shaky ground, but here's the thing, it was about to get even worse. As reporters continued to push for answers, a new topic was introduced, one that would take the train wreck quality of the presser to a whole new level, a fabricated report known as the Maha Study. We'll get to all the absurd details about that in a minute, but suffice it to say, Leavitt's laugh wasn't the only thing people would be talking about by the end of the day. What's worse than trying to justify sloppy policies? Apparently trying to defend a report that doesn't even exist. That's where things took another wild turn during Karoline Leavitt's press conference. Enter the Maha Report, or as it was officially called, Make America Healthy Again. Sounds noble, right? Except the only thing it seemed to make healthy was the skepticism of every reporter in the room. This report was supposed to be the administration's shining beacon for health initiatives, but instead, it turned out to be full of fantasy citations and non-existent studies. If health policy were a house of cards, this one didn't just wobble, it collapsed with the force of a wrecking ball. The questions began almost immediately. Who authored the report? Where did the data come from? And most pressingly, is this even real? For a moment, Leavitt appeared ready to face the storm. She delivered her line with unwavering confidence, claiming that the Department of Health and Human Services had produced one of the most transformative health reports that has ever been released by the federal government. A bold claim, but just like the report itself, it wasn't backed by much substance. Reporters weren't buying it. They pounced on every vague response like a cat with a laser pointer, repeatedly pressing her for specifics. That's when the holes became impossible to ignore. At the heart of the firestorm was the fact that key citations in the report couldn't be traced. Investigative outlet Notice had already blown the whistle, exposing that many of the supposed authors listed in the report flat out denied any involvement. Even better, or worse depending on your view, several cited studies in the report literally did not exist. One reporter asked how this could have slipped through quality checks. Leavitt, still sticking to her talking point like duct tape on a sinking raft, insisted these were just minor formatting issues being addressed. Minor formatting issues, that's like trying to explain a plane crash by saying the seatbelt signs malfunctioned. But it got even better, or worse, when suspicions of artificial intelligence came up. Yep, AI. When questioned about whether AI tools had been used to generate parts of the report, Leavitt's response was a masterclass in dodging. She shrugged it off, saying she couldn't speak to the report's methods, and punted responsibility squarely onto HHS. It was clear she wanted to move past the topic, but reporters weren't letting her wiggle out so easily. Each non-answer seemed to feed their growing frustration. Confidence in the administration's credibility, already teetering from the earlier court rulings, took another nosedive. If this was the White House's idea of political theater, then the audience wasn't clapping. They were laughing and booing from the same seats. The irony here is almost poetic. The Maha report was probably intended to be a shiny distraction, a way to redirect attention from the controversies surrounding other administration policies. Instead, it became its own scandal, one practically designed to make everyone question who's steering the ship at this point. A health initiative built on fabricated research? It's not just embarrassing, it's dangerous. When a government can't even be trusted to tell the truth about something as basic as public health, you have to wonder what else they're willing to fake. It's the kind of incompetence that stops being funny pretty quickly. Still, nothing about this presser was handled with the gravity it deserved. Levitt's responses grew more fragmented with every challenging question. One journalist bluntly asked how the administration planned to salvage credibility when the foundational data of their report was a complete sham. Her reply? A string of vaguely reassuring phrases about dedication to transparency and commitment to transformative policy didn't actually answer anything. If verbal gymnastics were an Olympic sport, Levitt might have gotten a bronze medal, although to be fair, nobody would accuse her performance of sticking the landing. Her quotes became more like a word salad with extra dressing, filling up time, but ultimately leaving everyone unsatisfied. Then there's the unavoidable lesson in all of this. Relying on fake studies and sloppy data to push an agenda comes at a massive cost. In this case, it wasn't just policymakers and stenographers feeling the backlash. The broader public got a rare peek behind the curtain, and what they saw wasn't reassuring. The White House might have hoped this health report would boost their image as proactive and solutions-oriented. Now, they've not only fumbled the ball, they've handed it to their critics on a silver platter. It's one thing to defend controversial policies, it's another to build those defenses with scaffolding made out of lies. Notice continued exposing missteps from the administration after the press conference, digging even deeper into the fraudulent origins of the Maha report. Their investigation, combined with Leavitt's performance, painted a picture of a White House comfortable with cutting corners. So comfortable, in fact, that they didn't even bother hiding it well. Every denial by supposed authors and non-existent footnote discovered only amplified the sense that nobody was taking responsibility here. The administration's credibility wasn't just dented, it was totaled. And yet, while all this was unfolding, another crisis was waiting quietly in the wings. Because as ridiculous as the Maha debacle was, it wasn't the only talking point that day. If you thought Levitt's handling of fictional data was bad, wait until you hear about her answer to a seemingly simple question about the Qatari jet. This wasn't just one bad day, it was a lineup of hold my drink moments, each more baffling than the last. If you thought things couldn't spiral further after the Maha report fiasco, you'd be wrong. The next train wreck on the docket was a simple question about a Qatari jet. All Levitt had to do was clarify whether this jet was a purchase or a gift. That's it. Basic stuff. Instead, what followed was a response so tangled it could have been mistaken for a riddle. Levitt described the transaction as a government-to-government gift transfer from the Qataris to the Department of Defense to the United States Air Force. The government's financial jargon might not captivate the average viewer, but when your administration's math doesn't add up, the consequences aren't just theoretical, they're real, expensive, and felt by the taxpayers whose wallets are chained to these decisions. These two talking points, the Qatari jet and the budget bill, don't seem related on the surface, but together, they painted a messy picture of an administration out of step with itself. On one hand, you've got confusion over whether international transactions are gifts or buys. On the other, a willful dismissal of concrete numbers in favor of magical thinking. This wasn't just a communications problem, it was a trust problem. The press walked into that room already skeptical, and by the time Levitt had babbled her way through the jet and financial projections, they were heading back to their desks with even sharper questions about who, if anyone, is steering the ship. If chaos had a flavor, Levitt was serving it by the gallon. Her communication style that day could best be described as trying to bake a cake without a recipe and setting the kitchen on fire. Every explanation made things worse. Instead of serving substance, she whipped up confusion and topped it off with dismissiveness. Moments like these aren't just bad optics. They're the kind of moments that stick in people's heads long after the press conference ends. They reinforce a narrative of dysfunction, not just in Levitt's responses, but in how the entire administration handles itself when pressed. By the time she wrapped up, it wasn't just words hanging in the air. It was the lingering sense that nobody really had a plan. Not her, not the White House, and certainly not the people crafting policies while crossing their financial fingers behind their backs. For an administration already battling court losses, scrutiny over fabricated reports, and now a math problem that started with 4 trillion, there wasn't just smoke at this podium, there was a full-on blaze. And while this press conference could have ended there, the chaos had already completed its mission of cementing the perception of a White House that couldn't get out of its own way. The press conference wasn't just a bad day for Karoline Leavitt, it was a full-on display of a White House scrambling to keep things from unraveling. From court rulings to made-up health reports, every topic revealed a deeper issue. Nobody seemed to be in control, and when control slips at the top, the impact hits everyone. Economies wobble, courts face unchecked defiance, and public trust dissolves faster than promises during campaign season. If this disaster taught us anything, it's that chaos doesn't end at the podium. Stick around, because if this presser was bad, the next one might actually break the record.